Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a quick unboxing of the Sony FX3. For those of you that watched my full review of this camera, you probably knew this was coming already because I did indicate in that video that this would likely be added to my bag, and here it is. Now, it is expensive at a little under 4,000 US dollars, but in my opinion, this does represent Sony's biggest leap when it comes to merging the actual A style, that is E-mount mirrorless full-frame body, with a true video feature set. And many will argue the A7S III already delivered that, and in large part that's true. However, this is truly aimed at being a dedicated video camera. Now, for some, cinema camera will be a bit of a stretch because it is missing some core cinema features. The best example would really be true 4K, no DCI 4K, and that is a big deal. But for me, it's not. Most of the content I produce with this will be used here on YouTube, and I can live without that. And that's why Sony markets this as a B cam in the FX lineup of cameras, understandably. So we've got, first thing out of the box, a Type-C to Type-A USB cable, some paperwork, mainly the warranty information, and let's get into the actual packaging. And I already knew this was coming, but it is surprising to see a Sony camera that is just marketing free. So for all of the people that feel this camera is all about marketing, interesting to see that when it comes to the packaging, Sony said, you know what, we don't need to market it. We don't need to make a pretty package. And I agree. So one of the differentiating factors with this is, specifically the FX3, is the Xlr Top Handle. And this is something that again brings another element to the FX3 to reiterate this is a video-centric tool. And whether or not you're going to use this, I do think Sony would be wise to introduce an FX3 sans the Xlr adapter. Even though I think the majority of FX3 owners will likely use this, it wouldn't hurt to have it at a lower price point and still have this as an option. That's just my opinion. What is really nice about it is that it does mount right on to the hot shoe, and essentially the quarter 20 mounts you lose are reintroduced. So really nice touch, and it gives you a fairly solid ability to do some XLR mixing there. So nice touch, but again, not everybody needs it. I don't think there's anything in there. This is the camera itself. We'll save that for last. Of course, we have the Z battery charger, which is nothing new to me. I mean, I've owned these dedicated battery chargers since they first launched, but definitely good to have one come with the camera, but I wouldn't expect anything less. Then we've got the power adapter that connects to that. And over here, I believe we have a strap. I am having some trouble negotiating that. Let me just pull the camera out. The most exciting, arguably, part of this entire thing. And we should have, I did not see the actual battery. Don't think I missed it. I believe this is a oh, that is the battery, as well as the hot shoe cover. Yep, and the Z battery, which, one of the beautiful things about that Z-style battery was the battery life that it brought to the table. Let's get the box out of the way, and let's get to the star of the show. And, I wondered if some of you thought maybe I was not serious about picking this up because, again, there's so much emphasis on this being an A7S III rebranded, and I get it. Same sensor, same feature set. Of course, it doesn't have the EVF, which some will view as a downgrade. But for me, the rebranding is kind of important. It's really that simple as far as wanting a tool designed specifically for one task, as opposed to the A7S III, which has always been a hybrid. This is, not a hybrid. I mean, yes, it has all the same features other than the EVF, different body style, the quarter 20 mounts wrapped around, which I love, the cage-free build. I love that we've got active cooling because better to have it and not need it than the reverse, which inherently does occur. I've had enough cameras overheat on me that I'd always rather have the active cooling than not. And it's not audible. It's not going to be picked up for the most part by any microphone that you would have mounted or that you'd be using in conjunction with it. The I/O on this camera is what it should be. Basically, you have everything you would possibly need. So, I mean, in terms of a wish list for the future, I do hope that Sony adds a DCI 4K. I already said it's not something I actually have to have, but if they did it, I certainly would appreciate it, as would every other FX3 owner. Of course, no ND filters are going to happen. There are some other features inherently that are missing from this, but the build quality is excellent. I think this is design language that Sony should set out with going forward across all of their alpha cameras, but I don't think we'll see that. Love the record button, love the zoom rocker right here, which essentially, if you have a power zoom lens on it, you will be able to control it with that zoom, like you would on a point and shoot, for lack of a better way of positioning it. But if you're using a prime lens, it will just crop in 1.5 times, so I think that's great as well. The lens that I will primarily be shooting this with is my good old trusty 28-135, which you really cannot go wrong with for the price point. I mean, this has been Sony's kit lens for their cinema line for a long time. They do have an APS-C version, but if, like me, you want a hybrid where you can actually shoot full-frame stills as well, this is the way to go. It's not a perfect lens, but at $2,500 retail, and of course less in aftermarket, you will be hard-pressed to find anything that truly competes with it. So again, let's just pop on that handle. And to me, if you choose not to get this not to pick up the FX3 because of the feature set and the fact that, you prefer the A7S III, there's nothing wrong with that. I just think that if you're shooting video exclusively and you decide that this is not worthwhile because of the additional cost associated with the XLR adapter, really, because that is where it's coming in, I think that's a mistake. That's just, again, my personal opinion. I think that everything Sony did here is smart. I don't think they missed the mark on anything. Would it be nice to have an EVF? I wouldn't be against it, but I don't really see an EVF as being principal to this setup. I'm more focused on the obvious, which is using an external monitor is going to happen. And I just love that we have all these mount points, because cages are fine. They're always going to serve a purpose, but if I can avoid them, I'd rather avoid them. It just becomes cumbersome, and some people will argue, well, it's good for protection, but I don't think you really need it for that either. So I don't think there's a strong or a great argument for a cage when the camera is built like one. And in this case, it is. So let's go ahead and pop on the PZ, and let's see what that looks like. I mean, I've already used it, obviously, but for anyone who's wondering, there's that 12 megapixel sensor, which isn't ideal for stills, but certainly in a pinch will be serviceable. Low light is still really good on this camera, but Sony's come a long way with low light on their higher megapixel sensor cameras. So the logic of, well, if it's a higher megapixel count, it instantly equates to poor low light performance is not correct anymore. Let's see if that balances nicely, and it does. So even on the lens collar mounting point, this thing stays balanced. And this is an optimal kit, in my opinion. I mean, you've got, for all purposes, everything you could possibly need with a single body and a single lens. Now, if you need to get wider, obviously you will. I may end up picking up maybe the Prime 14 mil that I recently reviewed. We'll see. But, regardless of that, getting a wider angle is not a big deal. I think for most video shooters, having something that isn't prime obviously is going to be more beneficial when it comes to an ultra wide. So the 12-24 G Master, even with its expensive price, you do get what you pay for there at around $3,000. That might be an option that I jump on with this, because I do want to have more flexibility. As much as I love the 28-135 and the power zoom feature, I know I'm going to need to get a little bit wider in certain circumstances. So that's where, my old 16-35 Sony, the Zeiss Sony, isn't going to cut it. And while I like the 16-35 GM, it's a little bit older. Focus is not as good as the 12-24. Sigma also makes a great 14-24 f2.8, a lot more affordable. So we'll see. I've got some decisions, but this is going to be primarily what I'll be shooting with for the most part. I do have a decent amount of glass, so no shortage there. But I'm just excited to finally have this in hand. And the ergonomics on this thing are just better than the majority of Sony alpha cameras at this point also. So that's another thing that's noteworthy in my opinion. So again, really like this FX3, 4K 120, full HD 240 frames, 4K 60, obviously not a problem at all. It's a matter of what you want to shoot. And then if you want to get the most out of it, you are going to want Sony's compact flash Express Type A cards, which basically are, you know, SD NVMe drives for all intents and purposes, with their right around 700 to 800 meg read writes. So dual slots for redundancy or additional card storage, whatever you prefer, but just a really nice camera, and I think Sony got this exactly right. So again, just wanted to share it with all of you, get it out of the box, and be sharing content from this bad boy sooner rather than later. But yeah, just a really nice piece of kit. I think Sony did everything right. I love the giant record button on the top, love it on the front, love the fact that we've got tally lights all over the place, so it's clear that the camera's hot. It's just smart all around. So kudos to Sony for making a winner, and they sold me on something which takes quite a bit to do. Granted, they make a lot of great gear. This is the first E-mount body that I've actually purchased since the A7R IV, which isn't that long ago, but still, we are in a pandemic, and new gear purchases, you know, you got to really be able to justify them, in my opinion. And this one was easy for me to justify. Hope you enjoyed the unboxing. Again, if you watched my review, this is redundant, but it's just reiterating how good a product I think the FX3 ultimately is. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. Hit that like button. And as usual, please feel free to subscribe, and please stay safe. Later.